Abby, I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the series where once a week I sit down and just talk about albums that I love. If 20-minute deep dive episodes aren't your thing, don't worry, I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds on this channel as well as my Instagram. Making a quick note before I start this episode off, full disclosure, I am filming in my slippers today. I'm not shy at all about using self-soothing techniques to get myself through my videos, but here we are. Yeah, we're slowly getting to the point where you guys are building hype around my videos, and that is great, but I'm also a little scared by it because I don't want to let you guys down. I wanted to cover a record this week that to me just screams fall. For that, I picked Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere by Neil Young and Crazy Horse. Congrats to those who guessed this one. If you want a hint for what next week's record is going to be, go check out my community tab. I do a bunch of fun stuff over there, little behind the scenes, polls sometimes. I post a counter of how many videos it's been since I swear enough to get through the full chord progression of Our Prayer by the Beach Boys. It's great. I almost said or swear right there. Does this album not just scream fall to everybody else? Maybe that's just because of the memories that I have with this record. We'll get into those later when I share my thoughts about this baby. For now, let's take the plastic off this thing. Wow! So my copy is a repress of some kind. It's got the One Color Reprise Records labels on the disc. On this cover, we have the grainiest photo you have ever seen, starring the man himself, Neil Young, and his dog. This photography was done by Frank Bez with art direction by Edward Thrasher. Opening up the gatefold, I totally forgot this album was a gatefold, by the way. We have some more photography of Neil hanging out with the dog, as well as the Crazy Horse guys. We will get into the story of Crazy Horse very soon, and this just feels so cozy and personal to me. I love a gatefold where you have snapshots of the guys just hanging around, or even of the guys making the album in the studio. That's why I love the gatefold of Layla so much. It feels very spontaneous, very unpretentious, and very personal. I dig it a lot. And on the back cover, we have our track listing. This is the Neil that I picture in my head when somebody says Neil Young. Lots of brown, country clothes, long hair, looking a little grumpy despite the fact that he was actually probably happy in this photo. On Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, we have Neil Young fronting the band on vocals and guitar, and he's accompanied by Danny Whitten on guitar, Billy Talbot on bass, and Ralph Molina on drums. Danny and Ralph also sing harmony vocals with Neil. We have Bobby Notkoff playing the violin on this record, as well as a guest vocalist. Ms. Robin Lane lends her vocals to Round and Round. This record was produced by Neil Young with David Briggs, and they worked on Neil's album before this release. It is no surprise to me at all that Neil Young would be producing his own stuff. From all of the stories the CSN guys told, Neil Young was a pretty particular dude. That is not a callback to a previous Vinyl Monday episode at all. So like I just said, Neil released an album before this, simply self-titled, Neil Young. Pretend I have it right here. That album almost immediately followed his departure from his previous group, Buffalo Springfield, which he was in with Stephen Stills. That will all become very important to the story later, but for right now, it's 1969. As much as Neil liked being solo, he wasn't crazy about how the self-titled record came out. Specifically, he wasn't thrilled with how done up everything was. As you can imagine, that doesn't work for a guy who is historically obsessed with capturing authenticity through his music. And not to mention, Neil wasn't crazy about how the mix of Self-Titled came out. He produced that record himself, and he felt like he could have done a lot better without being tethered to that mono to stereo adaptable nonsense that the music industry was obsessed with in 1968. That's what messed with the mix of his first Self-Titled record so badly. Like, if you track down those records in the wild, I've heard those original presses sound pretty gnarly. If you can confirm, please drop that in the comments. Immediately after Self-Titled, he sets out to make a follow-up that would blow his previous efforts out of the friggin' water. Just how immediately is this? Just you wait. While this was Neil's second album solo, this was his first album with his new band, Crazy Horse. So Wynton, Talbot, and Molina started out in a group called Danny and the Memories, which later had a name change into The Rockets. We actually have on this record, in the liner notes, credited special thanks to The Rockets. And I think Neil is thanking The Rockets in this album because he basically blew the band up to form Crazy Horse. So Neil saw the Rockets playing at the Whiskey, and he decided that he wanted some of these guys for his own backing band. This is only how I can imagine that conversation going. Hey man, I really like your group. And Danny, I really respect what you're doing as a guitarist. I actually happen to really look up to you. What do you say you join my folk country rock backing band? And they said yes. Neil plucks Wynton, Talbot, and Molina from the Rockets to be in his band, and Crazy Horse is born. The violinist on this record, Bobby Notkoff, he was also in the Rockets, so Neil basically poached all of the Rockets to be on this album. So Neil has his backing band put together, and he can finally make this vision that he has for Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere come to life. As the story goes, Neil is in bed with a fever, and he writes 4 songs in the same day. Cinnamon Girl, Down by the River, Cowgirl in the Sand, and the title track. That's right, he wrote the lyrics for half of this album in one day. This album is literally a fever dream. His vocal take of the title track was meant to be just a placeholder while the instrumentation was being worked out, but Neil decided he liked it, so he kept it. And that's what we hear on this record. No comped vocals, no pitch correction, no reverb, only Neil. Recording took place at Wally Hayter's Studio 3 in Hollywood. Denny Bruce dropped in on the sessions with his roommate at the time, Jack Nitzsche, who you might remember from Sticky Fingers, which we covered a couple weeks back. Neil either played them Down by the River or Cowgirl in the Sand. It was one of the 2 long ones. Denny doesn't totally remember which, but he was especially impressed by Neil's new group. And the track listing on Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere goes as follows. Opening up side 1, you have Cinnamon Girl, followed by the title track, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. Then you have Round and Round with the subtitle, It Won't Be Long. And side A is closed by the 9-minute epic Down by the River. Side 2 opens with When You're on the Losing End, followed by Running Dry with the subtitle Requiem for the Rockets. And the album is closed with another epic, the 10-minute Cowgirl in the Sand. This album was released in May of 1969, only 4 months after the release of Self-Titled. This is a really impressive turnaround from forming the band to the writing phase, recording, production, packaging. All of this came out 4 months after his first album. That's not quite finishing a whole record in 13 days like Janis, or 6 like The Doors, but still, damn, Neil! And people were raving over Neil and Crazy Horse together. Peter Lewis went nuts when Neil played him the acetate for this record, repeating over and over, "This is gonna make you a rock star, man." And it kinda did. Well, it took some time. It really took until the follow-up record after the Gold Rush for people to really pay attention to Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. Critics, fans, and the man himself felt like this record established Neil's vision as a solo artist a lot better than the first album did. 4 years after its release, Neil said this about Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere on a radio show: "I don't think there's anything on it that I didn't like. I like it all." Of course you do, Neil. You had complete creative control. That's when a change came over me. Right then, I started trying to do what I was doing, just trying to be real. I wanted them to know where I was at. Since then, I've just been striving to get it realer and realer on the record. Is that not the most delightfully water sign thing you've ever heard? It's like Joni Mitchell's quote about the cellophane wrapper on the outside of the pack of cigarettes that she used to describe Blue. Ugh, I love me a good Scorpio. Everybody knows, in a way, not like everybody knows, like the phrase, like I'm shortening the album title, so it's just Everybody Knows. Okay, Everybody Knows set off a domino effect that, at least I think, would lead to Deja Vu. His influence on this album is unmistakable, palpable, and essential. And you hear the bare bones of what Neil put into Deja Vu on Everybody Knows. Man, that is the perfect segue to getting into my thoughts about this one. When we're down and out, we as humans tend to feel isolated. And through feeling that way, we tend to isolate ourselves. We get to feeling like we are an island, like nobody has ever been where we are before, and no one ever will be where we are. That's not really true, of course. We can never know 100% how somebody else is feeling. Unless you're me and Bestie Jack, the guy who makes the R swear memes for my community tab. Yeah, we share the same fucking brain cell. But through moments where we're struggling, we latch on to the stuff that speaks to us. Some people watch reruns of The Office for like 5 whole years. I latch on to music. Going in, I have some great memories of Neil Young's work, and this record in particular. This and Harvest. I have my copy of Harvest right here. She's very fragile and a little broken, but I love her anyway. Along with about a milk crate's worth of other albums, these two came with me to every single college apartment I lived in. I have very vivid memories of playing the shit out of this record in the fall of 2019. I wore the same green plaid shirt and brown wool sweater on an almost constant rotation with my Doc Martens Oxfords and my black felt fedora hat. Yeah, I reeked of art student. In the time since my junior year of college, I have grown to favor Harvest, which I have right here, and Zuma, which I sadly don't own. But this one is still very near and dear to my heart. This is a short album. This is only about 40 minutes long, which is such a relief after physical goddamn graffiti. But there are the jams. We will get to the jams. It's been a long time since I was really heavy into this record. But through my first listen for this video while I was making dinner one night, all of the words to the songs just came flooding back to me, and I remembered it all like that. Don't roast me, I can't snap my fingers. All the harmonies came back too. That's the power of a good lyricist and a good songwriter. Everything, no matter how long it's been, will come rushing back to you. It's been stuck to your ribs all that time and you wouldn't even know it. The riffs stick with me too. I'll listen to this album once and have them rattling around in my head for the rest of the day. During my second listen, while I was writing the notes that I have right in front of me, my head perked up a few times, and that is not easy to do. When I get into writing these episodes, I fall into like a trance. I black out and an episode is done. The back half of Cinnamon Girl took me by surprise. I was not expecting it. The drama of the electric guitar, it just gets me so good. I wasn't expecting to like Cinnamon Girl at all. I used to not like that song. It's only 3 minutes long. It's a bit more of a digestible length, and it's there so you can get settled into this record. Conversely, the acoustic guitar that starts It Won't Be Long, that was a wonderful breath of fresh air after Cinnamon Girl and your title track. And then it happened a third time with that wailing violin on Running Dry. Neil Young and Crazy Horse and Company really know how to open a song. I adore the backing vocals. They're sweet without being saccharine and goofy without being too goofy. When I'm singing along to this record, I don't usually sing with Neil's parts. I sing to the harmonies. I do that with Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs as well. And I think that's kind of my sign for if I like the vocals as a whole on the record, is if I pick out those backing vocals and I sing with them instead. That's not to say I don't like Neil Young's voice. I actually enjoy it. His voice is gentle, not weak, mournful, but not sappy, and just bitter enough to make his delivery work. I see why people might not be crazy about Neil Young's voice. It's definitely an acquired taste. It's like black coffee or plain grapefruit. Bittersweet. Luckily for this record, I like plain grapefruit. Yeah, pack your patience for this album. I will say it takes a while for things to get where they need to go. Speaking of things taking a while to get someplace, Down by the River, am I right? It still goes somewhere after 7 minutes, and that is impressive as hell. Yeah, even after what might be the most off-putting beginning to a guitar solo ever. Oh my god. I get why it's done that way, okay? It helps set the mood and build the tension and whatever, but it's like someone glued Neil's fingers to the fretboard, man. I feel the attitude in it. I appreciate it for that reason, but I just can't get that image out of my head. It takes a while to set into, and I do think it's a little long. On to the B-side. I am a lot more familiar with the hits on the A-side than I am on the B-side. I played the A-side a lot more in college. This is very much a front-loaded record, but then again, for the reason I just stated, I could absolutely be biased. Part of the reason I kind of let the B-side slip by me is because I used to think Down by the River was the better jam. To me, it had a clearer journey, it had a clearer focus, and the Cowgirl in the Sand jamming didn't hold my attention the same way back then. But then, I came back to this album in 2022. This was about 6 minutes into my third listen of Cowgirl in the Sand in one day. And I discovered, wow, I actually really like this song. I like Cowgirl in the Sand now because once it finally gets where it's going, there's something going on at all of the levels in the jamming. I'm gonna explain what I mean by this by referring back to Down by the River. Jamming loses me and loses a lot of other people when the players get comfy. On Down by the River, Billy gets comfy with his bass part. There is not much variation at all in what he's playing. I might have to listen to it again to see if there's any variation in his part throughout the bulk of that song. That doesn't happen on Cowgirl in the Sand. You can hear that the guys really had fun recording that one. Billy feels a lot freer, and he's not playing just, the constant loop that he was playing on Down by the River. And while I'm listening, I find myself gravitating towards what Ralph is doing on the drums. Of course, I have to mention the lyrics on this record. Neil Young is one of the great lyricists. Everybody else has said it, so I really don't feel the need to harp on that too much in this video. But another thing that kind of converted me on Cowgirl in the Sand was listening to the lyrics. Old enough now to change your name, when so many love you, is it the same? That could mean so many things, depending on where the players are in their lives, depending on where the listeners are in theirs. I'm sure those lines are going to mean something completely different to me in a few years. They definitely mean something to me now, and it's interesting considering that didn't quite resonate with me yet at age 20 when I was first listening to this. As difficult as they may be for a new Neil Young listener, I know they were difficult for me. I do believe the jams are the anchor points of this album. They are essential. They're similar, sure, but they're also so different. In a lot of ways, this record is the Neil Young blueprint, at least for right now, where he is in 1969. Neil is a chameleon. He's done so many different things throughout his musical career. My personal favorite being the time he almost went grunge. I love 90s Neil. He throws away the blueprint every few records, which is why I find him so intriguing. But right now, this is the defining Neil Young statement. To understand this, and absolutely to understand this, you first gotta comb your way through what's going on this. Everybody Knows is not a happy record, but it's also not a sad record. It's a glad to have this when I need it, glad to know somebody has been on this island with me record. Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere is raw, and it's a little rough around the edges. It's not a shining picture of perfection by any means, but it's vulnerable and it's so authentic. You have to be patient with it, but it's absolutely worth the wait. My personal favorites are Cinnamon Girl, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, It Won't Be Long, Down by the River, and Cowgirl in the Sand. And that is it. Those are all of my thoughts on Neil Young and Crazy Horse's first album. What do you think about this one? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about the albums that I love. And if you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!